Hello, everybody. Welcome to the WISH national event, Women in Leadership, a discussion with two female chief executives about leadership lessons. I'm Jenny Neville. I'm a WISH Northwest board member. Before we start the event, I'd like to thank our sponsor, RPS. They are specialists in project management, commercial management, health and safety, amongst other things. So thank you to RPS. Absolutely delighted to welcome you today. Thanks so much for joining. I feel like you're all joining a virtual sofa with Nicole and Colette and I, and it's just great to have you with us. When I was preparing for this event, I read a KPMG report which was based on a survey of 3,000 working women in the United States, and there were some interesting statistics. Over 50% of the women surveyed said that as women, they were more cautious about taking steps forward into a leadership role. And 60% of those surveyed said they didn't see themselves actually as a leader then and in the future. So something is holding us back. However, in the same report, 82% of those surveyed believed that access to female leaders and opportunities to network with female leaders would help them advance their career into leadership roles. So I completely agree with that, and that's why we're here, and that's why this WISH event is on today. So I hope that today's session will help in a small but meaningful way to provide you with virtual access to female leaders. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Nicole Kershaw, Chief Executive of One Manchester, who own and manage 12,000 properties across Manchester, and Colette McCune, Chief Executive of For Housing, a provider that owns and manages 24,000 properties across the Northwest. So I'm going to dive straight into questions, if that's okay, Nicole and Cole. So, and then, as I said earlier, we'll take some questions from the audience too. So first, starting with you, Nick, what motivated you to become a chief executive in housing?
Hi, Jenny. Thanks for that. So surprisingly enough, it wasn't something that I aspired to be when I was little. I didn't think, oh, I'm going to be a chief exec of a housing association. So I think there's an element of, there's an element of luck, but there's also an element of, I did know that I wanted to do something that made a real difference. And I genuinely believe what we do, what housing does, makes a difference every day. So, however, I didn't have the belief that I could be a chief exec until I had my son, who's now 4. And that was the actual catalyst for me to think, actually, I'm going to push myself. I'm going to actually go because I wanted to make a really big difference. And I feel massively privileged being in the role that I'm in. So, yeah, I think although I've been in housing for a number of years and I've loved everything that I've done, that belief in yourself and that confidence has come for me personally since having my son, because actually it's been very much about being that role model. And also, you know, it's a very tough and complex time. And I think we are very privileged to be able to be, you know, make some difference and have that, that platform to influence change. So yeah, for me personally, it's my son that's kind of inspired me to push myself to do this.
Super. And Carl?
I suppose, hi everyone. I suppose not dissimilar to Nicole. I don't think I thought as a child I'd be CEO of a housing organisation. But also, I don't think being the CEO has ever really motivated me. Neither being a director. It's never really been the job title that's motivated me. I suppose what's motivated me is wanting to be the best that I could possibly be, to succeed. But, and again, linking into what Nicole said, to that making a difference, to actually do something that made a difference. I haven't been in housing for lots of years. I've had a very different career path. You know, I've lived in social housing. I was brought up in social housing. Went on to university, lived in Australia, worked for the police, worked in construction, worked in procurement, worked in supported housing, and then somehow found my way into Manchester, Salford, heading up a multi-million pound regeneration programme. And how did I end up becoming chief exec? It was almost, I suppose, by chance. I actually, what also motivated me, I thought I could do it. And I saw how others did it. And I thought I can do better than that in some cases. I agree with Nicole that we are in a very privileged position in that we are able to improve people's lives and really make a difference. And that feels good. That really does feel good. And none more so than during the past 14, 15 months through the challenges that COVID, where housing associations have really proven their worth as an anchor organisation in communities, working in partnership with the local authorities, working in partnership with health, with the NHS, with the CCGs. We've really, really shown our worth. There's massive challenges ahead for us all, but it's certainly challenges that I think certainly Nicole and I can face, and the CEOs I know, particularly within the Greater Manchester region and the North West, will face, and will face it more in collaboration, I believe.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, and what are you most proud of as of achieving as a leader, Col?
I think if you'd have asked me the question before COVID, I'd have said to you, creating the positive culture in the organisation within For Housing. It's not perfect, nowhere is perfect, but we do have a really inclusive, positive culture. But I think what I believe gives me the greatest joy is leading the organisation through COVID and leading the organisation with compassion. I think that was absolutely critical. Making sure that staff and tenants felt that their safety, their security was absolutely paramount at the forefront of every single decision that we made in the organisation. And it will continue to be at the forefront of every single decision that we make in the organisation. So that, yeah, that I'm pretty proud of that in housing. That's what I've achieved. I mean, obviously, the thing I'm most proud of is my daughter, my family, and my grandson. That's what I'm at. But leading with compassion and the positive impact on the organisation has been a big ticket one for me.
Yeah, you are most commonly known as Nanny Col, aren't you? To be fair, and you're very affectionate towards children, which I've seen firsthand. And I think it's really interesting that you're most proud of being compassionate. And I think many years ago, I think as women, we didn't feel like being compassionate was a good thing as a leader. And I think this is changing now, and and I think we can accept that empathy and compassion as leadership traits are actually really bloody essential, and and should not, and other traits such as managerial courage or decisive decision making shouldn't be seen as better than that, those softer traits like compassion and empathy. So I think it's really interesting that you say that. Because I think that sometimes women as leaders think, oh, I don't want to be open about the fact that I'm compassionate and empathetic, because I think they need to be perceived as something different.
Yeah, and I can get that. And there are some female leaders, not necessarily in the sector, who have conformed to stereotypical male types of leadership, and that's done us a disservice in the past. I've certainly worked for one of those in my past life. But just before I move on, I just want to clarify to everyone why I'm referred to as Nanny Col. My staff. On a number of occasions during COVID, my grandson, who we were looking at, who too, would come into the room and bombard. And I would never expect a member of staff. I would never shoo him away, and made him sometimes part of the meetings, as I would encourage any of my staff to do. And I suppose, that's something called leading by example.
Okay. And Nicole, what are you most proud of as achieving as a leader?
Oh God, it's a difficult one, this, Jen, because there's loads really. I mean, I'm with Col around COVID, because genuinely every single person, every colleague in our organisation, they were just inspiring. They went above and beyond. It was very much, the safety of our customers and communities first, and people were selfless during an exceptionally difficult time, because I think, you know, COVID has been, it's a trauma, and people are still dealing with that. And, you know, our frontline operatives were out and were making them as safe as they possibly could be, but they were worried about going home. They were worried about what they were taking home because we didn't know. So exceptionally proud of that. And it was really difficult. I think one of my biggest challenges, because I think I was like 2 months into the job before we mobilised. So first time as a chief exec, mobilising the organisation, didn't necessarily have that connection in place with everybody. And you're dealing with a crisis. So massively proud of how everybody came together and the outcomes that we got. But aside from COVID, I mean, I think empathy is just so hugely important. The ability to just be human. And if there's anything that's good that's come out of the situation with COVID and continues, is we are all human. So that ability to show that and to connect and to be yourself, you know, Nanny Col. I was home literally doing vlogs for the organisation, my son Arlo on my knee, because we were shielding. You know, there wasn't a choice in that, but actually, I think it just showed we are all the same and we were all pulling in the same direction. So yeah, that gives you a sense of pride. I think aside from that, what am I most proud of? I think developing people. So really developing people and being able to, I suppose, play a small part in helping people to be the best version of themselves. I'm really fortunate. I've had some brilliant people in my life, some great mentors who've been really generous with the time. So, you know, for me, when you see people becoming what they want to become and having more belief in themselves, and you've had a part in that's amazing. But also when you're getting great outcomes from the people you're serving. And for me, we are a service industry, we serve people. So when we're seeing some of those positive outcomes, however small that might be, that can't help make you proud. So every day, you know, genuinely, regardless of how big or small it is, I just feel privileged because we get to do that in our sector.
I mean, just to put some extra context to your appointment as well, this was your first chief executive role. In the sector, you're probably considered quite young for a chief executive. And what I loved about your appointment as well, Nicole, is that you were kind of customer background and really passionate about the customer. And I thought it was great, you know, for us to see that appointment in the sector. You know, a young female chief executive who really advocates for the customer. I thought that was a great appointment. But that, just to put some context as well into your first 2 months in and your new role as chief executive with COVID, I can imagine, you know, that was quite a difficult, you know, achievement. And just the last bit of your response there about, you know, serving the customers and being enormously proud about the services, you know, and the outcomes to customers. That doesn't surprise me as well, given you've always been passionate about the customer. What do you think's been your biggest failure, Nicole?
Okay, it's a bit of a difficult one, this, because I see failure as quite a positive, because, you know, you fail every day, you fail fast, don't you? You learn from it. And actually, I want that culture where you can make a failure and you do learn. But I've got loads of mistakes, so I'll probably phrase it in mistakes if that's all right. So probably my biggest mistake, and it's a theme really, has not listening to my own instincts and intuition. And I think that's something that you're much more instinctive when you're young, and then obviously things happen and then you just, it's beaten out of you and you don't listen to it. So I think whenever I've made a spectacular mistake, it's because I've not listened to that voice in my head. So whether that's been certain jobs that I've gone for, whether that's been certain things that I've done at work where, you know, it's probably been expected, but actually instinctively, I don't think it's the right thing. So, and what I've learned to do is listen to my instincts a lot more. Yes, triangulate, but listen to my instincts a lot more, because I don't think that will lead you far astray. I think some of my other mistakes have been, when you go through change, it is so difficult. And, you know, I think collectively, the world's going through the biggest change in our generation. And it's so difficult when it's ongoing change and you can't see what that end is. But I suppose if you're doing a change program, and you know, I've done quite a few of those over my career, giving people that clarity as quickly as you can, because actually people can then connect and make their own decisions, and that the ability to communicate and really hear. So I think some of my mistakes have come where, you know, we've perhaps overthought things, we've not moved things on as quickly as we could, we've not listened as well as we could. Hopefully, you know, I've learned from those, still get things wrong, but you know, I'm human at the end of the day, and I think it's continuous learning, isn't it? But yeah, those are some of my thoughts on kind of failures and mistakes.
And what about you, Colette? What's your biggest failure or mistakes?
How long have you got? As you keep referring to Nicole as the young chief executive, I've got some years on Nicole, and but I fully agree. I see failure. Real failure is failing to learn from your failure. If you fail, you must learn from it. And some of the most successful people in the world have failed and they've learned and become successful. And for me, it's about making those mistakes. And again, not dissimilar from Nicole, it's not trusting my instincts, not going with my gut feeling, not dealing with something at pace when I should have dealt with it when it felt wrong. You know, I've got an old saying, if it waggles like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. I'd normally add some expletives before that, which is where I am. But it's a duck, but there's some occasions where I've seen it waddle and I've heard it quack, and I've still thought, no, that, you know, I've gotten this wrong. So I haven't gone with my gut, and that's led to some issues. I think one of the mistakes I've made is that during organisational change is I haven't explained the why. So sometimes with change, or you do things, you make decisions in organisations, and you do the what, the when, and the how. And actually what I've learned is you need to spend people, whether they're tenants, whether they're staff, whether they're stakeholders, you need to spend time on explaining the why you are doing something, and not just concentrate on the how and the when you're going to do it. So, and that's led to that mistake of not explaining the why has led to some failures, organisational failures and personal failures. And it's something very much I work on to make sure now that at the start of any change, any key decision, why are we doing that? Why are we making that decision? Why are we taking that action? And it's amazing when you put that question out to people, they do start to think and go, why? I have a rule now, and it's called the river methodology, because every time you ask him, when you say he can't do something, he goes, why though? Why though? And we're going to adopt that rule. Times in work, I'm told by people, we do it because of this. We do that process because of this. We have this 100-day repair because of this. You know, we have this tenant waiting because this is the process. I'm going to follow the river rule and go, why though? Why though? And it will make people think, and that asking that very simple question will make people think and will make people change.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere once that you have to ask why 5 times before you then really get to the why. But I think, Nicole, you made a good point as well, is that you can engage people and you can listen, but do you really hear? So you've got to really hear as well as communicate well. But I think also what I took from what you were saying there is that, you know, mistakes are part of daily life, you know, and you know, embrace them. And, you know, as long as they, you know, use them as a learning opportunity, then that's something to, you know, it's a positive, basically, you were saying, Nicole. And I think I heard once as well that in Silicon Valley, in the pubs there, you know, there isn't one-upmanship about what they've achieved. It's actually there's one-upmanship about what the biggest failures have been. And that tends to be like that's where they're competitive, and I think that goes to show you actually to really innovate and to excel, you've got to really fail well as well. So just sticking with you, Carl, what challenges have you faced to reach the top, and what challenges do you envisage going forward?
As a woman, faced as a gay woman, faced many challenges. But if we take the woman piece first, you know, I've worked. I told you about my journey before into how I got to BSc. I've worked in Australia in the 90s, not the most accepting country in the world, in which, you know, open sexism and homophobia. I then worked for the police, and I'll leave that hanging there, because in the 90s it wasn't the most inclusive place to work. And I had my challenges there because I was the woman. Not only was I a woman, I was a civilian. And it would, you know, it was a standard line of a superintendent, you know, you're only a woman and you're only a civilian, you know, and it's a difficult one to hear all the time. Then went into construction, and, you know, sitting around the table and being the only woman surrounded by 20 contractors, and automatically assuming that the person I walk in the room with is my boss and I'm there to make the tea. You know, these challenges, and, you know, and again, I'm flippant about it now, but it cut to the core. It really did cut to the core of me as to I am as capable, if not more capable than most of the individuals sitting in this room. And yet you look down your nose at me and you speak differently about me. Then couple that with the fact that I'm an openly gay woman, and the language that is then used covertly and sometimes overtly, and the very subtle discrimination that you face. And that challenge emanates because you have to work harder. You have to work harder for your voice, and you have to work hard. You have to perform that bit better. But also what you've got to control yourself to do is to, as people get lower, you've got to get higher. And that's how I've approached it. I've always approached it. It still happens now. You know, anyone who thinks discrimination is gone and people still aren't sexist and homophobic, and even in the sector, you know, and people, it's much more subtle now, and actually it's a bias rather than a discrimination. People don't realise they're doing it. But if you look at the use of language, you know, male chief executives are courageous, are strong, are passionate. A female chief executive is domineering and emotional. The language that is used is wrong, and that to me identifies bias that some people have. You know, if you know, male chief executives call someone into the office to have a strong conversation, you know, it's they're a strong leader there. Whereas, you know, I'm just, you know, what mood is she in? I'll put it a different way than I was going to put it, but what mood is she in? It's like, you know, and that's a challenge, and that's still a challenge that we will face moving forward. And that's why I'm so passionate about equity, inclusivity within our organisation and within the sector, because it's still out there. Do I think that we've got many challenges facing us as chief executives of Nick and I? God, so many. The financial challenges, the organisation with decarbonisation, with building safety, but then balancing that with recognising the challenges on tenants, the affordability. You know, we're about to enter into the world of potential rent increases. We've got fuel shortages. We've got cost of living going through the roof. We've got people in real poverty, and we've got to try, and it's a constant balancing act about how do you do this? How do you run a business commercially, and how do you run it with that social heart? And that's a big challenge that as a sector and as CEOs that we have to face. Sorry if I went on there.
No, it's fine. Very welcome. Nicole, do you want to kind of share insight in the challenges that you've faced, and what do you think the challenges are in the future too?
Yeah, I mean, just listening to Carl, there's similarities, especially, you know, from a female perspective. I think I worked in the commercial sector, so when I finished university, I went into the commercial sector. So yeah, and it felt quite accepted that actually you would reach a certain limit or you would be in a certain position. I think I quickly realised it probably wasn't for me because I was far too challenging, because I would never accept the norm, because I think sometimes your biggest challenge is yourself, because it's actually you that puts the limits on yourself. So, and when I came over to the housing sector, you know, I just remember thinking, wow, this is fantastic. And I, you know, really enjoyed being in it. But I think I continued to challenge some of those norms. The first place that I worked, we had you know, I consider a very inspirational chief executive. But, you know, there were downsides to that. And I think sometimes you have to be very sighted of yourself when you're in a leadership position, because you can't believe your own hype. And that can actually create a culture which can be quite damaging. And I don't think it's from a position of bad intent, but you know, you can run away with yourself. So it's really important thinking about having a culture and leaders around you that can upwardly challenge, and that to be okay, because I've been in situations where that's not been okay. And I think that led me to make some of my decisions about my career. And, you know, sometimes if I've left an organization, I've absolutely loved that organization, but I've not loved that leader anymore. And working for somebody who inspires me or who I connect with is massively important. So some of those challenges have been something that, you know, I've grappled with and wrangled with. I faced a fair degree of sexism. I remember one time, a place I won't go into, but it was in housing, where there was a property services director who said to me, you know, how do you feel being a woman in this male environment? And I was just like, have you honestly said that? Did you not check that out with yourself before you said it? And I don't think, again, because I try and see things from other people's point of view, I don't think there was malice behind it, but judgment goes far. Sometimes you don't even realize that you're being judgmental about things. And there's a long way for us to go to be inclusive. In my newest appointment, you know, I love what I do and I genuinely love the organisation. But we're evolving that organisation, and, you know, that's difficult when you've had a very successful predecessor who's, you know, done some really good things, but the world is changing. Our organisation needs to change. That's tough for people. And I'm a very different leader to my predecessor. So, you know, and especially when we've been in such a virtual way, how you connect so people can make their own judgment, that's a challenge, isn't it? I think moving forward, Cole's touched on some of the huge issues that we've got. But I'd like to think there's opportunity that will come out of that. And I think what we've got to do collectively is look towards those opportunities to collaborate, to really do what we can for our customers and communities. Well, you're probably not surprised to hear me say that. That's what I'm all about. But actually, regardless of our political leaning or, you know, our personal opinions, when funding is going to be coming available, how do we really look towards that? How do we collectively think, what do we want to do? And we bring inward funding into our communities. We, you know, think about how we can improve prosperity for customers. So yeah, there's an awful lot we need to do. We need to grapple with it. Our boards need to grapple with it. But I think, you know, we've got to have a strong sense of social purpose, understand what we're about, and then really focus on the things that we can do, so we can, you know, try and find some of those solutions.
Gosh, some loads of good stuff there, and loads resonated with me. And one point in particular, when you said actually connection, you know, with, you know, a leader and their staff is so important, and there are lots of challenges to that. And I read recently that one of the most appreciated attributes of a good leader is humility. And I think, you know, you talked before almost like about, you know, looking yourself in the mirror and you know, and about hype and ego. And I think humility is one of those things that's really understated and is really important. for leaders to show, and which helps that connection. That just sharing that little reflection with you. And then just staying with you, Nicole, what advice can you give our delegates for developing their own careers in leadership?
So first thing, find something that you love, because if you love it, it really isn't, it's not hard. You know, I love what I do. I've always loved what I've done. So I think if you've got that, it's then thinking wider. I think sometimes people get really caught up on maybe a linear path in terms of, you know, how I get there. Actually, every role that I've done has added to me being a rounded person. And I suppose I took a bit of time, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, to think about the where next for me. And I challenged myself to do some things that perhaps were outside of my comfort zone. But that's been fantastic, because it's made me much more rounded in terms of what I've done. But the themes that I've loved have been around customers, about opportunities, they've been about change. So those have been my guiding principles. So yeah, I think it's tough. It's really, really tough. You know, I think some of the most difficult things we do are really trying to listen and trying to develop people. And sometimes, you know, if you're an empathetic person, you don't switch off. You know, you take that home with you. It's those 3 a.m. moments where you'll wake up on the conversations that you've had. And I do think, you know, leaders of tomorrow, it's even more difficult with everything that's going on. So that's why I think passion is really important. If you love what you do, you've kind of got to be, yes, it's a bit of an overused phrase, but being kind is important, not just to others, but to yourself. Because I think you have a real expectation. I'm sure Cole's the same. You drive yourself really hard. You beat yourself up. That's pretty exhausting. But actually, if you know that you're coming from a position of good intent, and, you know, you make it okay for people to give you that feedback, I think that's an important quality of being a good leader as well, where you've got the open dialogue. So yeah, passion, empathy, and being human, probably the last thing. You know, I'm really, really glad people have got to see a bit more about me. I'm trying to encourage people to bring their whole self to work, because I don't think we should compartmentalize our lives, because it's not real, is it? So yeah, I think the more human we can be, more approachable we are, I think those are good leadership qualities.
I really liked what you said about don't get too hung up on a linear path, because I think sometimes people see a leadership role and think, well, I've got to do this, and I've got to do that, then I've got to do this. And actually, like you said, if you're saying yes to the things you love and you're developing as a person in those things, then, you know, and you are passionate, empathetic, and, you know, you can get there. It doesn't always have to be a kind of a structured path. I think you kind of alluding to that at the beginning. I think you both were, actually, in terms of you didn't set out to be chief executive in housing. You know, it almost, some of it might have been a little bit random. But Colette, can I come to you in terms of what your advice is to our delegates for developing their careers in leadership?
Well, again, I wouldn't disagree with anything that Cole said in relation to passion, empathy, and being human. I think that's all really, really important, and I absolutely concur with not following a linear path. If the outcome that you want is to be a CEO, and that's your key driver, I think you just need to look a little bit at yourself and actually think what you want to do is be the best that you can possibly be. And if you perform the best that you can possibly perform in the organisations that you work with, that will be an outcome of it. But don't be so linear around it. I also think that potentially could drive wrong behaviours. But the important thing for me, absolutely, yeah, be passionate, be empathetic, have compassion, be true to yourself. Don't try to be the mirror image of another chief executive. I've seen it happen, and I've seen people try to imitate me, and that's not good. You've got to be true to yourself, but you've also got to be authentic. You know, do what you say you're going to do. Develop trusting relationships. People, as a leader, people need to trust you. So I think, yeah, being authentic is really, really important. Being true to yourself is really, really important. And again, you know, if I look to the mistakes I've made, it was not following my gut instinct. Follow your gut sometimes as well. I think that's really, really important. And then very practical tip, learn from others. Get yourself a good mentor as well.
I was just going to do a bit of a plug for mentoring because, you know, Carla, I'm really passionate about mentoring and I've been plugging it this week. But if there isn't formal mentoring programs in your organisation, go and put your hand up, go and seek out a leader you admire within or outside your organisation and ask. In fact, one of my friends who's a managing director of a business responded to a post on LinkedIn where somebody in a supermarket just said, I'm really looking for a mentor. They worked in back office and they put a post on LinkedIn and she responded to that post and mentored this person. I thought, what great initiative. That's bloody fantastic. So, you know, if there isn't formal programs that you can get on board with, you know, go and ask and take that initiative because I also think it's really good for the mentor as well, because if you're a mentee that you know, is experiencing certain barriers or challenges to your leadership pathway, then actually it's really good to share them with a leader who can do something about that or can recognize that in their own organization. So I'm glad you said that, Carl, because I was going to do a bit of a plug for that. So thank you. And someone said this week at another fantastic event went to on Monday at the Housing Diversity Network, a young BAME board member had gone through a program and talked about authenticity, Carl, and he'd said that in this program he originally thought he was looking at other board members and thinking, oh sugar, I should behave like them, and that's how he started. And then he realized and he said something that really resonated with everybody. He said, but hang on a minute, if I'm not myself, I'm depriving the world of myself. And it was just brilliant, those words. And so you're absolutely right about authenticity as well. Completely support that. And one other thing I would say as well, and I think I always say this to people I develop and work with, is always say yes. And I know there's some context and caveats to that, but just always say yes. Someone said, oh, I followed your advice and I said yes, but now I'm a board member at 2 positions and I'm struggling. But anyway, that's another thing. So just staying with you, Carl, in terms of my last question, then we'll open it up to the audience. And it kind of relates to something you said, Nicole, earlier about being able to enable people to bring their whole selves, their true selves to work. How are you developing a culture of psychological safety in your own organisation? So we can start with you, Colette.
First of all, I think it's so important that you say that psychological safety in the organisation is a priority. You recognise it. You don't just think it's implied or it just naturally happens. I think it's really, really important that people feel safe to explore ideas in an organisation, to try new things. And then if it does fail or they make a mistake, that actually that's embraced and it's embraced positively. You know, that you're not going to encourage psychological safety if sometimes someone makes a mistake and then we come into blame or that person's not capable. So I think as an organisation, you've got to make it explicit and you've got to facilitate people being able to speak up. So as you know, Jen, you know, I actually feel more connected to staff in the last 18 months than I've ever felt physically, because I engage with staff every couple of months at a webinar. And as you know, and certainly I know there's a couple of people from our organisation who are in this session. And I'm going to give a shout out to Sharon Wallace. I hope you're keeping well. And I think, you know, some people will know that we do the webinar, and I encourage staff to ask me anything. And they might not always get the answer they want, but they can ask, and asking some of those questions and being able to get the answers and being able to understand the why. But they've also been able to challenge and being able to challenge openly and see that, but other staff are then seeing the results of that challenge and then they're feeling okay. And it's quite interesting. I don't know if you've noticed this, Jen, but in the organisation when we do that, there are less and less people doing anonymous questions.
Yeah.
people feel comfortable to actually ask that outright, because they're not going to be shut down, or they're not going to be, that's a stupid question. So I think creating the space for new ideas, but facilitating the opportunity for people to ask questions and share new ideas, and also embracing productive conflict, actually challenge people, as long as it's done in a respectful way. But I do think that it's important that people do feel safe in the organisation, both physically and psychologically. So, but you've got to be very explicit around setting that environment.
Yeah. Nicole, do you want to kind of just touch upon about how you're trying to build a culture of psychological safety at One Manchester?
I mean, I think everything Cole said is really important, and I agree wholeheartedly with it. I think psychological safety is part of your culture, and I think many a time people don't focus enough on creating the right culture or an intentional culture. And I know one of the things that we're currently looking at very much is our purpose, our values, our behaviours, and being intentional about what that is, so people can connect. And as part of that, you know, the bring your whole self to work, the fact that we want to be a learning organisation, the fact that actually we're encouraging voices, not just, you know, to put it out there, but to really do something with that insight, so that insight to action piece. We've been doing similar to other organisations. We've got a colleague voice. That's been really important. That's across the organisation, and it's a decision-making forum that happens after our board, and I attend that and share that, and then that connects with the organisation and comes back up. We've made ED&I part of our governance structure. So we have an ED&I committee that is part of like our governance and reports to board. And again, that sense of inclusion has been massively important, I think, for psychological safety. I do Natter with Nick sessions. I did that, started that throughout COVID. So, and that was just literally come along, have a brew, have a chat. And you know, I do that. You can ask any questions, similar to Cole, and I love doing that. I mean, that's amazing. I think in the times when we all felt, you know, quite hopeless, just the power to be able to have time to connect and come over, and, you know, encouraging that open speak. I think, you know, it is difficult when you're doing this, especially for managers sometimes, because it's the fear of, well, what if somebody says something? Well, what if they do say something? You know, that doesn't automatically mean we're going to jump to blame. It means that we're allowing people to speak, and it's about getting that level of empathy so people can put themselves in other people's shoes, and we might see things differently, you know. So again, I think you've got to encourage and embrace the high support and high challenge, but to do that, you need to be able to have an environment where it's safe to give feedback. There's a method in how you can do that. You've got a culture which is an adult culture, and that takes time. So it's all of those steps. Again, it's not linear. Some days I just think, yay, fantastic. You know, we've had a really good session. We've had something that's fantastic. You know, the next day you're just like, oh God, why has that happened? You know, and you take it personally, but you're on a learning journey with it. But I think being intentional about what you're doing really helps, and hopefully people kind of then start to connect with it.
Yeah, no, listen, I love the Natter with Nick, by the way. That's really good. Some good stuff in there. I think one thing we've done as well is it might be helpful to others. We've done podcasts with staff where they come and tell their stories about their experiences, and so then people can resonate with those experiences and just try and understand and learn more about them. And some small things we did as well when we asked staff for ideas. We got rid of the dress code, you know, because we wanted to encourage people. And that's one thing I always remember about you, Nicole, is when I met you in person for the first time at a CIH conference yonks ago, and you turned up in your dungaree dress, and I was like, oh, I love dungaree dresses, but I never had the confidence to go to CIH in one. And I was like, oh, that's absolutely fantastic that you feel able to kind of be yourself at an event like that. And I just love that. Anyway, that's a bit random. But that kind of concludes my questions for you. And I'm happy now if Emmy's still with us to kind of lift everybody's cameras, and I'm happy for the audience to get involved with questions. I have got a question for you already. Is Have either Nicole or Colette participated in career coaching to help them develop? And then subsequent to that, did you find an NED role on a board as part of your career path? That's good, really good questions. That's from Tuesday Hanley. So first of all, if I can come to you, Colette, have you ever participated in career coaching?
Yes, I have had a coach on a couple of occasions, not necessarily to help me become a CEO, but actually to help me in terms of how I was as a leader, or how I am as a leader. And also it's really good to have a coach. Always be careful what you wish for, because, you know, as Nicole and I have both said, you know, we never intentionally thought that we'd be, you know, when we were kids, that we'd be CEOs in housing. I never thought I'd be a CEO. And I probably drifted into it. And it's an incredibly lonely place. It's an incredibly hard place to be. So you do need somebody to be able to talk to, and often having a coach is a very safe space to be in, because they're there for you and they're not there to judge. I always found that really, really useful. So yes, and I'd encourage anyone to look at some career coaching and coaching in general. But in terms of the other part of the question, is an NED role, did an NED role help? Yeah, undoubtedly. I've had a couple of NED roles. I've been the chair of an equality and diversity organisation with the Housing Association, and I've also been part of an NED, a stock transfer organisation, both of which I found incredibly useful.
And how about you, Nicole? Have you undertaken career coaching, and do you have an NED role, or have you had an NED role in the past?
Oh, yes, to both. So I've been really fortunate to have coaching. So if that is ever offered, I would say absolutely yes to doing that. And I still have a coach and mentor, and I think that's really, really important, because I do like, it can sometimes be lonely, but also I like somebody to just say, oh no, that's bullshit. You need someone to say that, but you have to build a relationship. So 100% do that. I've done NED roles, yes. I used to be on the board of Wish, which was amazing, so that was fantastic. I've been on a housing association board, and I've done trustee positions at charities as well. Not at the moment, because I really need to focus on One Manchester, but potentially next year I would definitely do it again. It's just brilliant. So if you get the chance, 100% yes, do it.
I would say do it as well on NEDs. And can I just encourage our delegates today, doesn't matter what role you have, how old you are, you know, everybody's got valued lived experience, and it's really important boards are diverse. So don't think that when you see adverts that they're not for you, that they're for men in their 50s or they're for directors. It's not the case. There's been some real kind of encouragement to get more people kind of active in board positions. So just wanted to kind of put that out there as well. And you know, actually, if our Wish members think it might be helpful, I'm quite happy, you know, us as a board would be quite happy maybe to look at some advice around, you know, how you identify, how you prepare yourself, and how you get ready for an NED role. Perhaps we'll take some advice offline from members on that. Cameras are enabled. If people want to turn them off and join us on our virtual sofa, then you're very welcome. But if you want to stay, it's entirely up to you. Apparently they are enabled. So if you do want to join us and so we can see you, then you're very welcome. Hello, hi Liz, you okay? Good to see you. And I've had another question. If you could give yourself if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, so when you're starting your careers in your late teens, what one piece of advice would you give yourself? Colette, will come to you.
Wear more sunscreen. No.
Is that in Australia?
Yeah. What would be the piece of advice I'd give myself? Don't doubt yourself. we all get imposter syndrome, don't we? How many of us wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm absolutely useless. And yeah, I think it's have faith in, I have more faith in myself would be what I would be saying to my younger self, as well as wear more sunscreen, don't drink too much alcohol, don't smoke. There'd be loads of things.
And what about you, Nicole?
Oh, I wouldn't give myself that advice. I'd say go wild. They'll say that, yeah, when you're young enough to do it. What would I say? Oh, I think I'd probably say enjoy where you're at, because it's gone in the blink of an eye. It really, really is. And everything that I've done, I'm a person that does pace, and actually you can just forget to enjoy where you're at. And it's really important to enjoy where you're at. Take things a bit less seriously, have the belief and faith in yourself, and have fun. I think that's a really big thing.
Yeah, good one. We've got just over 5 minutes left, but I'm just going to ask if our marketing person is still on. Can you share the poll now? Because I know sometimes people need to leave a couple of minutes early. So there's just going to be a poll that comes on your screen. 2 very short questions about this session, but as we do that, I'm going to carry on with some of the questions on the chat, if that's okay. So if the poll pops up, if you could just answer the 2 questions, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much. So Carl, another question, I'm going to come to you first, is from Janice Peterson. Really great question. She says, you both said being a CEO can be a lonely place. So how do you remain so resilient?
Okay, really good question. Yes, it is, but it's also a really privileged place, and I don't think you can forget that for 1 minute. And you are driven to absolutely make a difference, and the thought that I can make such a difference keeps my resilience up. Also, I'm surrounded by some fantastic people who are much more brilliant than me, and we've got, you know, a great team. And at the end of the day, my little boy, you know, my family, that's why I'm doing this. So, you know, I think if in doubt, that does connect me.
What about you, Colette?
I have a friend called Chardonnay.
And one called Malbec as well.
yeah, that is not, and I make Malbec. How do you remain resilient? Not taking yourself so seriously, actually putting some of it into perspective, making sure that you concentrate on what's really, really important as well to me is my family. You know, that I have, you know, like we all do, really tough days. And during COVID, there were some days I just wanted to put my head in my hands. And then my grandson had come in, and he was the one thing that could take me out. And then I started to look at it and think, actually, I do this for him, and I do this for my family. I do it to make my daughter proud. So yeah, it is lonely. It's a difficult job. Yes, it is a very privileged job, but it's hard, and you do have to be resilient, and you do have to build up that resilience. Having a good friendship group and people that you can talk to as well, really, really important.
Yeah, no, you've always stressed, actually, as a leader, that how you need to, your priorities are you and your family first. I think other concepts we've explored is about ensuring you've got your hobbies, whether that's running or sports or music, arts, crafts, that you've got something else, you know, to balance that time with as well, isn't it? We've got more questions. I think we've just got time for one more. Tricky question. Alison Rogers, do you ever see a time when there will no longer be a need for women in groups?
Great question. I remember standing up in the Women in Construction Awards at the Palace Hotel. It's got to have been 12 years ago. And there were 400-500 people. It was at the time, you know, one of these big award dinners, and I was the key speaker. And I wished for the day when there wasn't a Woman in Construction Awards. And that was 12 years ago. Do I think we're any nearer? No, I don't. I really, truly don't. I have an aspiration. It would be great that actually we just don't have those divides. But sadly, I think we're a long way off it. But great question.
Do you have a view, Nicole?
Difficult. I really hope, well, in my lifetime, there is a chance that we don't have to have, whether it's women in, whether, you know, it's a different demographic, because actually I would like to think we're moving more to being inclusive, but that's massively challenging. So I'd like to think we'll get to the point when we don't. I don't think we're there. I do think we're making steps. I think things like this help. So, you know, but yeah, there's a long way to go.
Yeah. And I'm going to be sneaky. There's another question that I'd like to just put to you as well. It's a big one, so we might have to try and be quite succinct in our response. So from Eleanor Matthews, lovely name, Eleanor, by the way. My daughter's called Eleanor. I am a 27-year-old housing professional, and I would really love to join a board, gain more experience, and start sharing thoughts and ideas. Brilliant. I have applied for positions previously, but I've never had responses. I'm so disappointed. Just for that, by the way. What advice can you give me? Can you give young female professionals looking to break into that kind of a board role?
I'd suggest be brave and be bold. Contact all these chief executives, particularly female chief executives, who sit in sessions like this and say they support and young people, and to seek and they create an opportunity for you. Now, that opportunity might be a board opportunity at this moment in time, but actually, you know, be brave and be bold and approach some of us, and you never know, you know, sometimes some good can come out of it.
And how about you, Nicole?
I'd definitely say that. Reach out, because there will be people that will help. Because I've had some of those people help. So there's definitely people there that will help. I'd also ask for feedback, because I just find that rude, to be honest. It really gets my go that, you know, once you've applied for something, you've took that time, people should come back to you. So I would be asking the reason as to why, because again, that's about how we'll develop about it. But, you know, definitely reach out. There'll be people there that will help you, and don't give up either.
Yeah, definitely reach out. I'm a mentor in a formal program, and I've just helped my mentee, supported my mentee in an application which he's been successful on. He's a young BAME man, and so I think getting advice, you know, through informal mentors, formal mentors, or just being brave and bold and just approaching people direct. Even maybe put something on LinkedIn. In fact, actually, I think there's an organisation who were at CIH as well. There was a lady there. Is it Future Boards or something? If you have a look, do you know which organisation it is, either of you? But there's a woman who's been quite proactive about attracting interest from younger people, and she's probably a good person to reach out to. I'll try and find out. Try and remember who her name is. In fact, Eleanor, I'll if it's okay with you, I'll ask for your contact details from this event, and I'll try and connect you to that organisation and that person as well.
Yeah. Can I just come in just on one of the questions? I know we're going to close off in a minute, but just to Charlotte Layton, we all get imposter syndrome. You know, what is it? You know, that 4 o'clock in the morning anxiety that we're not good enough to do anything, that, you know, the world is coming to an end, that, you know, we don't deserve the life we have, we don't deserve the salaries we earn, someone's out to get us. We all have that imposter syndrome, and don't think that you're the only one. What you need to do is not let it inhibit you, because you'll have woken up this morning and thinking, God, what was all that about at 4 o'clock this morning? Try and switch off with the imposter syndrome, do something. I have terrible sleep patterns. I get it all the time. I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I actually get up and I do something. I try and do something physically active if it will allow me, or I'll actually do some work. But don't let imposter syndrome inhibit your life.
And that is a great point to end, I think, because I'm just conscious we're 1 minute over. I just want to say before we go, the next WISH event is Fire Safety for Residents. It's on the 8th of December at 12:30. And there are various regional Christmas dues now being brought together. So have a look on your regional pages for those. Thanks so much to Nicole and Colette. There's lots of comments coming on in the chat box about being so just direct, frank, open, honest, and sharing some of your leadership lessons with us. thoroughly enjoyed it, and I felt enormously privileged to kind of be here and have you as well. So enormous thanks, and thank you to everyone for joining. I think we got into our 60s, so fantastic that so many joined us. And then just little plug for Northwest board. We're looking for board members. So Eleanor, you might want to start with us. So, so we're going to put some things out in our social media channels about asking for expressions of interest from our community to join our Northwest board as well. And you never know, to all the other regions, I'm sure they might be looking to expand their board. So Wish might be a great place to start, like Nicole said in terms of earlier. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining. Have a great rest of the day, great week, and we'll see you soon.